I tried to avoid my CEO, the same way you avoid eye contact with someone who accidentally saw you, strategically, desperately, and with absolutely no plan. From the very first Monday, she stepped into our office, heels sharp against the marble floor and confidence wrapping around her like a tailored suit. I knew she was trouble for my carefully controlled life, not the dramatic, scandalous kind of trouble, the dangerous kind that makes your guarded heart consider opening a door it swore would stay locked. Her name was Evelyn Hart, the youngest CEO our company had ever appointed. Brilliant, elegant, and intimidating in a way that made entire boardrooms sit straighter. And me, I was just Daniel Reed, senior software analyst, allergic to office politics, and especially allergic to powerful women who could fire me with a single email. So, when HR announced a mandatory leadership workshop where we'd be paired randomly for a trust-building dinner, I prayed to every possible higher power not to be matched with her. Naturally, fate laughed. I found out through an automated message, blind date party H. My stomach dropped. I convinced myself it was a coincidence. There were down scenes of employees with those initials, but when I walked into the dimly lit rooftop restaurant that Friday night, trying to look like someone who didn't overthink everything, I saw her, not in her usual power suit. She was wearing a simple navy dress, her hair loose over her shoulders, looking human, soft, almost nervous. Our eyes met, and for a second, the CEO mask slipped. She looked just as surprised as I felt. "Danielle," she asked, and there was no corporate authority in her voice, just uncertainty. I considered pretending I was there to pick up takeout. Instead, I nodded. "Evelyn." The air between us was awkward, thick with unspoken hierarchy, but something shifted when she smiled at the polished boardroom smile. But a small, almost shy one. "I promise I won't evaluate your performance tonight," she said gently, and somehow, that tiny joke broke the ice. We talked, at first about safe things, coffee preferences, terrible commute stories, childhood dreams that had nothing to do with quarterly profits. Then the conversation deepened in ways I didn't expect. She told me how she lost her father at 17 and had to grow up overnight, how success became her armor, because vulnerability felt like weakness in a world that doubted young women in power. I told her about my mother's long battle with illness, how I learned that kindness isn't loud, it's quiet, patient, and stubborn. For the first time, I wasn't speaking to a CEO, I was speaking to a woman who carried invisible weight with remarkable grace. And she wasn't speaking to an employee, she was looking at me like I was simply Daniel. As the night stretched on, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, I realized I hadn't checked my phone once. I hadn't worried about office gossip, I hadn't tried to impress her. I'd just been myself. When a sudden gust of wind knocked over her glass, I instinctively reached to steady it, our hands brushing. Electricity is such a cliche word, but cliches exist for a reason. She pulled back slightly, then laughed at her own reaction. "I'm usually better composed than this," she admitted. "I hope not," I replied before I could stop myself. "I like this version." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, kind, intentional. That was the moment I realized I didn't want to avoid her anymore. But reality rushed back in when Monday came. In the office, she returned to being the CEO, focused, commanding, distant. I went back to being the employee who avoided the executive floor. I told myself Friday was a one-time anomaly, a glitch in the system, until I received an email from her assistant requesting my presence in her office. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. She stood by the window, city skyline behind her, expression unreadable. "Danielle," she began, professional tone restored, "there's a rumor going around about our dinner." Of course there was. My chest tightened. "If this puts you in a difficult position, I can request a transfer," I said quickly. "I never wanted to complicate things for you." She turned then, and something in her eyes softened. "You think I called you here to protect myself?" I blinked. "Isn't that what CEOs do?" A small sad smile curved her lips. "That's what I've always done." She stepped closer, closing the physical and invisible distance. But Friday wasn't strategy. It wasn't damage control. It was the first evening in years where I felt seen without expectation. My breath caught. She continued, voice steady but vulnerable. "I don't want to hide from that, and I don't want you to avoid me because you think I am above you." The word above lingered between us like a lie we'd both been told for too long. "Evelyn," I said quietly, "I was avoiding you because I was afraid, not of losing my job, of wanting something I thought I couldn't have." The confession hung in the air. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "What if She whispered, "You can have it." That was the twist I never saw coming. Not scandal, not termination, but choice. She had already spoken to the board about restructuring internal reporting lines, removing any direct authority over my department to avoid conflicts of interest. She hadn't called me in to warn me. She had called me in to tell me she chose integrity and a possibility with me over convenience. Kindness isn't grand gestures. It's careful decisions made to protect someone else's dignity. And in that moment, I saw how deeply kind she truly was. The weeks that followed were not a whirlwind of dramatic headlines or office chaos, but something far more powerful, steady, intentional love. We agreed to take things slow, to build something rooted in honesty rather than secrecy. Outside the office, she wasn't the untouchable CEO. She was Evelyn, who preferred street food over five-star restaurants and secretly loved terrible romantic comedies. I was Daniel, who stopped shrinking himself in rooms because someone powerful believed in him not as an asset, but as a partner. We faced whispers, yes, but we faced them together. When an anonymous complaint was filed suggesting favoritism, she handled it transparently, inviting an independent review that ultimately cleared us both. "If we're going to do this," she told me one evening as we walked through the park, fingers intertwined, "we do it with clean hands." That was her kindness again, fierce and protective, not just of herself, but of us. And here's the part that still feels unreal. Months later, during the company's annual gala, she stepped onto the stage, not to announce profits, but to speak about workplace humanity, about leadership with empathy, about seeing employees as people with stories. Then she did something no one expected. She invited me up. My heart nearly gave out as I joined her under the spotlight. "This year," she said to the stunned audience, "I learned that strength isn't about standing alone at the top. It's about having the courage to stand beside someone." Her hand found mine. No scandal, no secrecy, just truth. And in that room full of executives and flashing cameras, she looked at me the same way she had on the rooftop, like I wasn't beneath her or behind her, but exactly where I belonged. Later that night, away from the noise, she rested her forehead against mine and whispered, "Thank you for not avoiding me." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for showing me I never had to." Love didn't cost me my career. It didn't cost her respect. It cost us fear. And that's a price I would pay every time. Because sometimes the person you try hardest to avoid is the one brave enough to rewrite your entire story with kindness, with vulnerability, and with a happy ending neither of you dared to imagine.